G'day and welcome to another Relive Adelaide podcast. We're back in Adelaide. No intro today because we've got an absolutely jam-packed podcast. A lot of news to get through. Our main conversation point in this one, part 4 in the Adelaide Grand Prix series, is how we can remember the Adelaide Grand Prix. Joining me again, welcome back, Adrian.
Thanks for having me.
It's been 4 weeks. Does it feel like it?
Yes, time's very distorted at the moment, so I can't believe the year's half over.
Yeah, it's just absolutely flying. I don't believe it. We've had the Azerbaijan Grand Prix and the Canadian Grand Prix. Did you stay up for Canada?
I did, regrettably, but yeah, it was a good race, considering it. It's good to see, for me, those old school tracks, especially an old school street circuit that was around in the Adelaide era. I think that's it's always nice to see. As good as these new tracks like Azerbaijan are, I think F1 needs those historic circuits too.
Yeah. The Canadian Grand Prix has an absolutely terrible start time, and I might have done an all-nighter and I'm still paying for it now. We'll be joined after the news by Michael. He has started a very exciting project, and it is one of the ways that we can remember the Adelaide Grand Prix. We'll come on to that after the news. I did ask you a couple of weeks ago whether you would like to stay on for future podcasts, be co-host / special comments.
Sure, yeah, happy to. It's a topic obviously I know very well through the work I'm doing, so yeah, happy to sort of keep that Adelaide Grand Prix memory alive.
Fantastic. Great news. Through the news segment as well, we'll be playing some sound of an Adelaide Grand Prix era Formula One car, so we'll keep it simple. All you need to do is guess the engine configuration and the make of the engine as well. So whether it's Renault, BMW, Honda, Ferrari, Ford, Hart, 4, 6, 8, 10 or 12 cylinders. So we'll have a little bit of a guess after the news as to what that one might be. So without any more delay, let's fire up the engine. Shall we get on with the news?
Let's go for it.
So as we discussed in the news last month, Rundle Road is closed for the Illuminate Adelaide. So Ouch Studios' Wisdom of AI Light is on Rundle Road. So that's closed between East Terrace and Decateville Terrace. The Wisdom of AI Light starts from Saturday the 16th of July. Have you seen the road where it's shut?
Yeah, it's has an effect on traffic, as we know from Adelaide Grand Prix and Adelaide 500s and things. But as we said last time, it just shows that when the council wants to get behind something, they can make things happen. So interesting, given all the discussion around traffic restrictions for the Adelaide 500, that we have a separate event that's closed the road. But Adelaide needs major events, so this is inevitably what happens.
Yeah, and where it's closed off, it's only closed off at both ends. So the traffic restrictions aren't too bad. We're losing a little bit of parking, but to have another event in Adelaide's fantastic. The COVID testing centre is being moved from Victoria Park. So by the time the podcast comes out on Sunday, the COVID testing centre in Victoria Park will be no longer. So Victoria Park COVID testing centre will close 9 a.m. on July the 1st, and the new location at Edwards Park on Anzac Highway will open at the same time. Minister Chris Picton said the site has played a major role in the response to the pandemic, helping SA Pathology to deliver close to 4 million COVID-19 PCR tests in South Australia. More than 550,000 swabs have been performed at Victoria Park. So pretty amazing numbers.
Yeah, a few of those were mine. So it's good to see. Obviously, we want the Adelaide 500 back, and it's home. So something needed to move there because obviously construction needs to start pretty quickly. We're coming up to December in not too long. So there's a big job ahead of the government to get the Adelaide 500 up and running again after sort of hiatus, if you like. So it needs that space to get going, and I think that road needs some work. Even before 2020, there was some it was a sort of in a not a great state, so I think it needs some, new life to it.
Having said that, with the Victoria Park, the street circuit section running through Victoria Park, if it wasn't for that COVID testing centre, wouldn't have been as great and as delivered, it wouldn't have delivered as much for our state as it did.
Absolutely, and I think that was the argument that when the council said whether it should sort of tear up the road there at Victoria Park, that was the argument that I thought didn't make sense, is the fact that it's been used for so many different things over the years, whether it's cycling or pedal pre or, COVID testing. It's handy to have, so that road should have stayed, just not for the nostalgia factor, but just pure necessity.
Yeah. In the middle of June, we had the Pedal Pre event at Victoria Park, so it just shows that Victoria Park is once again a multi-use venue. I caught up with Jordan Lucas, so he was the opening rider and overall winner for Wattle Racing. Let's have a listen. Co-founder, president and rider for the overall winners Wattle Racing. Jordan, thanks for your time.
Hello guys, how are you?
Great. So, overall winners, how was the racing?
Yeah, we were very lucky with the weather actually. Either side of Saturday, the 17th of June, it was a little bit windy or gusty, cloud over, but Saturday it was perfect sunshine. And yeah, we had a very good race, a clean race, where we were able to come away with the overall win.
Just quickly, you say a clean race. Most people hear of pedal pre and think, oh, yeah, it's just somebody riding a little thing around, but they actually can go quite quick, and a lot of them seem to tip over pretty easily.
Yeah, so with these things, there are recumbent trikes. So there's 3 wheels, but you're laid back. And with the speeds that we hit, so our community teams are hitting up to 70 kilometres an hour, and coming into a 90-degree corner, they can get a bit unstable where you'll see a lot of crashes, or there might be another vehicle because there's so many on such a small track. So come Murray Bridge, which is in September around the Sturt Reserve, there's up to 200 teams. And in around Victoria Park, there's up to 130 teams. So within a 1.2k circuit, it does get pretty crowded. So accidents can happen. But yeah, for us, community teams, they separated us from the school teams, and we raced on the Saturday. And yeah, we managed to get away pretty unscathed, and yeah, had a clean race for the 6 hours.
You just mentioned that you're one of the community teams, and I was always under the impression that Pedal Pre was more of like a schools, TAFE, university thing. However, like after looking into it, anybody can build and enter. So you guys are one of the community teams like that?
Yeah, so everyone who knows about it generally starts from school. So primary schools do it, high schools are very into it, and from that they stem away and want to continue the sport. It's not a very well-known sport, but it's a very exciting sport once you get into it. And for us, for example, we're in Central Victoria in Bendigo, and we've got over 17 school teams around the Bendigo district. And we found that with our team, there's a lot of students that had finished school and want to continue to do it. So we built our own team, Wattle Racing, and it's just stemmed from that. And yeah, any team can enter. If there's an individual that is wanting to ride part of these Pedal Pre teams, they just need to contact the AIPP, so the Australian International Pedal Pre, and the management there will be able to help you find a team or get you some information of what it's about. And yeah, anyone can join, any age. They've got a veterans class, so anyone over 35 can race, and it goes all the way down to 12 years old. So yeah, it goes from a range of ages.
So you mentioned you guys are from Bendigo. Obviously, Victoria Park here in Adelaide is right in the city. How does the Victoria Park track compare to other tracks that you race at, and how important is it to have a Pedal Pre event in the city of Adelaide?
Well, coming from Central Victoria, the main racing for us is in South Australia, and at Victoria Park, it's actually probably our most favourite track. Being sort of a street circuit, it just gives that excitement. And you can get right up close to the atmosphere. You can get right next to the trikes. And we know that with the criterium racing around Victoria Park, it's a really well-known cycling district. So to have our sport going around Victoria Park is really exciting. We also head to the Bend Motorplex in Tailem Bend. That's a really big open circuit, and that's where over 200 teams compete. But sometimes with the way that that's set up, with how it's set up for the V8s and etc., motor racing, sometimes it kills the atmosphere because you can't get right up close to the strikes like you can at Victoria Park.
You mentioned before if somebody was wanting to get into the sport that they can look on the website. Do you recommend that somebody just jumps on the website and starts building at home, or is it best to come out to an event and get an idea of how other people have built and sort of learn from other people's experiences?
I think to start off with, jumping on the website, you'll get a fair bit of information, but ideally, if you want to start your own team, it's best coming to a race first because there is a lot of cost involved in these things. So the top teams in the community categories, for example, and even the top schools, they do their own designing and constructing. So it's all composite work with the fairings these days. So that's the outer shell around the chassis. And some of them, they're made out of Kevlar and carbon fibre with fancy moulds and whatnot. So you need to be able to have the experience to build these things or know someone who builds them. So attending a race, seeing how it all works and seeing how teams operate would be ideal. But yeah, there is plenty of information on the Australian Pedal Prix website.
Jordan, it's been really exciting chatting. Obviously, this was just a quick catch-up, but yeah, great to chat. Let's keep in touch and all the best for the remainder of this season, and we'll have a bit of an extended chat a little bit later.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
No worries. Cheers, Jordan.
Bye.
So that was the Pedal Prix, another fantastic event for us to have in Victoria Park and in the city.
Yeah, it's great. It's that's what we want from a Victoria Park, just multi-use and different things. And actual Pedal Prix was started in 1985 as a Grand Prix initiative. So it's great to see it continuing on and school kids getting involved in things. It's awesome.
Yeah. Also back is the Adelaide Equestrian Festival. So that's the international 3-day event, the 5-star international 3-day event. It's been rebadged and turned into the Adelaide Equestrian Festival. So it sounds like there's going to be something for everybody. And I caught up after that was announced with Greg Rolton. Exciting news, the Adelaide Equestrian Festival will be back in Victoria Park, and that includes the 5-star Australian International 3-day event. On the line is event chair Greg Rolton. Greg, thank you very much for your time.
Hello and welcome. Yeah, happy to be here.
So when's it all happening?
Okay, so we've traditionally run in November, but we're moving our date through to April 2023. So this will be the first time we run around that 20 to 23rd of April for next year. It's going to be an exciting time for us. As you mentioned, we're rebadging with the name of the Equestrian Festival, and that's just because we want to provide more than just the centrepiece, which is our 5-star event, so that when people come along, they can have a really entertaining day.
So with that 5-star event, the Australian International 3-day event, what's that all about? I'm sure people have seen pictures of the horses jumping over the obstacles, but I'm sure there's a little bit more to it. Just paint a little bit of a picture of what people can expect when they head along.
Sure. So the 3-day event is the Olympic sport of eventing, and the 3-day event literally means that the horses compete on 3 days. So the first day is dressage, then the second day is the cross-country day, and the third day is show jumping. The history of our sport is a long one in that it originally started out as military training exercises that then developed into a sport. And now we're looking at, that sport's been around for about 100 years. So that was how the sport developed, and of course it is part of the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games, you still have pure dressage and pure show jumping, but this sport runs, it's like the triathlon of equestrian sport. It is also one of those things that Australia has been good at for a long time, and consistently getting medals and placing in the top 10. So it's been an important part of our cultural history, but also our sporting history. So that, like I said, it became from military training, where the dressage was that importance of being able to parade. The cross country was, traditionally that was, horses were used to carry messages and be able to jump anything along the way. And then the final stage was with the show jumping, is that there is still that control and ability to parade while show jumping. So that's the history. but in more recent history, since the 1990s, Australia has been consistently in the medals, and the sport has been really important, as in our event, to our sport, because that is how our riders really test themselves at that highest level. This event, we're only one of 7 in the world, and that 7 includes either the World Championships and the Olympic Games. And so having one of those in the Southern Hemisphere, which we're the only one, is really important to our riders here in Australia, but also the riders in New Zealand. And we have a lot of horses and riders that come over for our event, because it's the time to for them to be able to be tested at the top level of 5-star, knowing that they are ready for an Olympic Games or a World Championships. Or every horse rider's dream in our sport is to go and do one of the big events across the world, whether it be Lexington in the United States, or badminton or Burghley in the United Kingdom, or Le Moulin in Germany. So it is a really important part of our sport, but what we've done is add that festival feel and to liven up the event for spectators that come along to have a look.
I've seen show jumping before in person, and seeing it on TV is one thing, but when you see it in person, you see the height of the obstacles and just the power that goes through the horse when they're jumping over it. It's really impressive to see. Am I right in saying that the Australian International 3-day event is an Olympic qualifying event?
It is, but it's the Olympics is every 4 years. So the event is used by the national selectors for the World Championships, which is, so it runs World Championships, and then 2 years later is Olympic Games, then 2 years later Worlds, and so on. So the event is really important for selectors to have a look at how our combinations here in Australia are performing at that level, and they're always under their scrutiny for selection for either the World Championships or Olympic Games.
How can people keep up to date and find out more about the event, getting closer to it?
Yeah, again, through our website. Like I said, we've just rebranded and relaunched as the Adelaide Equestrian Festival, and that is the best way to see what's happening. All ticketing is done through that site as well, but there's regular updates around who's coming and what's going to be happening as part of that festival of entertainment for so that you don't need to be a horse person to come along, but you can come along and see the world's best riders and horses, but also look at what the entertainment is that we're going to provide.
Greg, it all sounds really exciting. Best of luck with the planning. Are you happy to have another chat close to the event?
That'd be great, and then I can give you some real specifics around what's going to be happening, we can then talk about what will be happening in each of the 3 parks. So our whole event is based in Victoria Park, but the cross country actually runs through the next 2 parks up to Rymel and back again. So it's quite an expanse for the cross country day. So yeah, it'll be great to have a talk closer and give you some more specific information about how it's all coming together.
Sounds great. It's an exciting event for Adelaide. Obviously a great spot there in Victoria Park. We'll chat soon.
Thank you.
Cheers, Greg. Thank you.
Cheers.
So the Adelaide Equestrian Festival, that 5-star international 3-day event, really fantastic. So not only is it in Victoria Park, but also Rymel Park, and Rymel Park was also part of the Adelaide Street Circuit, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, that whole precinct, and that was the great thing about the Adelaide Grand Prix was you had the parklands around it that you could use for different things, whether it be concerts or marquees or, all that sort of thing, and that's what's great about Victoria Park now is it's still getting used for different types of events, and whether it's sort of horsepower of different kind or cars or whatever it is, and that's what it should be.
Coming on to Adelaide 500 news, so we've had announcements that some of the roads will be resurfaced, there'll be road closures. No announcement on tickets yet. The Premier said that'll be happening in the next couple of months, but there has been a 5-year contract signed. The Premier was on Adelaide's 5AA, and he spoke on Roey's Sports Show. Let's have a listen.
Supercars are locked in for the next 5 years. Will be the last race of the year. This year it's December 1st to 4th. Joining us, our Premier, Peter Malinauskas. Premier, great get and terrific for the state. Well done.
Yeah, Rowie, we're really excited today. The signing the ink on the contract today was a good moment. It feels like we're finally realising our ambition to bring back Adelaide as a centre for motorsport in the nation, and we're pretty confident, knowing what we know in terms of forecasts and the costs and so forth, that we can do something special that's going to attract a lot of crowds, particularly from interstate, which is so important for the revival of the city.
Just on that, what's it mean for the state? The numbers are quite amazing. Attracts, up to 15,000 interstate visitors?
That's right. So this is the one event that fills every hotel room in the city.
Wow.
And the big part of that, Rowie, is that it allows hotels to charge their rack rate. So they're not having to discount rooms to fill them up. This is where they fill them up at a premium, which means they can really set up their budgets for the months ahead. So that's what the hotel industry tells us. And then, of course, there's the cafes, the bars, and everything else that goes along with it. So we know it's a lot of jobs. We anticipate it'll be over $40 million of economic activity for the state, which means the investment in the scheme of things is actually quite modest. And the sense I get around the place, Rowie, talking anecdotally to a lot of people, there's no shortage of petrol heads and motorsport fans out there that are keen on it. But I think our challenge is to make sure we're attracting other demographics as well.
So with supercars locked in Adelaide for 5 years, it can't really get much better news than that, can we?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the hold-up was, just to get that contract signed. And obviously what we wanted to see was that sort of long-term commitment. Ever since the election, we knew the event was going to come back. We didn't know the sort of, the form or the date or the length. So this gives it security. And for me, the good thing is that the December date's locked in. I think that end of season works better than when we had it. There's not going to be that clash with the Fringe and Festival and all that. It's going to have its own clean air. It's going to be at the end of the season, so it has that Adelaide Grand Prix sort of connection, if you like, heading into summer. And there's things you can do around it, like the end of season gala, etc. So I think it works. It's a winner, and it's good to have that long-term security. So even if this first event is a bit of a, get back up and running, the future events can sort of get back to the Adelaide 500 we knew.
Also speaking on, Rowie's sports show was 5-time champion, 6-time Bathurst winner, and he's now heavily involved in supercars, Mark Scaife. Rowie asked, what's so good about the Adelaide street circuit? Let's have a listen.
Well, I was asked the same thing in the press conference today, and the way I put it is that great racetracks have got consequences. And this track's got that. It's risk versus reward. It's got some big, fast corners. If you make a mistake, it bites, and it bites hard. It's a famous street circuit, even from Formula One days through to what we've been able to show off since 1999. And we've seen some great racing. It's got great overtaking areas. It's a place that the drivers love. It will be, from a driver perspective, it'll be so positive when they get here as to finishing off our year. So not only does it bring all that I spoke of in terms of the character, the thing that's really great about it is the amphitheatre. If you're lucky enough to win the race and drive across the start-finish line, I will always remember I was very lucky in 2000 to start last, start 38th and win the race that day. And coming across the line, the amount of adulation and crowd response in that amphitheatre of Pitt Straight was just extraordinary. That's a memory that's sort of etched in my mind as to how the crowd reaction was.
So that was just a little bit of audio there from 5AA. If you do want to check out the full interview with the Premier, check out the 5AA Facebook page and their live stream of Rowie's Sports Show from the 23rd of June. 4:19pm the Premier was on. So yeah, if you do want to have a look, check that out. And for the audio, thanks goes to $13.95. Adelaide's 5AA. Also on the 23rd in the morning, David Pemberthy on The Breakfast Show had in his Breaking at 8 segment said that the Killers are very likely to play at the Adelaide 500. If you were a betting man, Adrian, would you put some money on the Killers heading along?
Yeah, I've heard that rumour too, and I think they definitely needed that big international act. Obviously, there was rumours around the Foo Fighters early on, and obviously the sort of the tragedy to do with the Foo Fighters probably stopped that. So, yeah, it makes sense, and I think that's a good get. Obviously, they needed that big international band. They really needed to sort of step it up and get back with a bang. So it seems like they're going to do that, which is, again, all positive signs that they're sort of fully committed.
The Killers sort of fit into that, middle age bracket as far as like a band goes. Do you reckon they also need something to bring the young people in? Maybe the latest DJ, or I don't know, somebody to get that younger crowd, the next generation of fans.
And that's what the event did well with the 4 days, and they used to have the 4 nights concerts and different things, and every night was a different type of concert. So I think if they go back to that, it gives them that wiggle room to attract different people, different things, different music types, different audiences, and an event of that size, that's what you need to break through. And I think that's what we were saying earlier about the Fringe and the festival. That's what you needed to move away from. So you give people a reason to come, because there's not much else on in the city. The problem was you had a major event across the road, literally, that was free to go to, and they could just go and hang out there. So why would they pay to go see something down the road? So it needs to have an impact, and it needs to be the only event in town at that time, which is what it seems like it will be.
Oh, well, if you've got any suggestions for who should come along to the Adelaide 500, or what band or act that they need to get, feel free to jump onto the Relive Adelaide Facebook page and leave a comment on the page there. Final bit of news is the Formula One was apparently nearly coming back to Adelaide. I saw this pop up on my Facebook feed and scrolled quickly past it. So it says, exclusive, how Adelaide nearly snatched back the F1 Grand Prix. Secret last-minute talks, high-level contacts just weeks into his new job. Premier Peter Malinauskas made an audacious attempt to wrestle back Formula One for SA. I think the big takeaway from that article is how much we can stretch the use of the word nearly. So there's, I nearly won the race, which is, I was leading, but on lap 2 my engine blew up, or I was leading and got overtaken on the final lap. It's, we nearly got the Formula Ones back.
Nearly is the operative word. Look, there's not much to that story. Obviously, there was a reach out from the government to Formula One, and apparently there was a Zoom meeting, but that doesn't necessarily mean we nearly snatched it from Melbourne. I think that's a bit of PR spin, which is, it's good if the government wants to do that, and it's good if it creates some buzz for Adelaide, but I don't think it does us any favours when we look at the reality of what that would look like, especially Melbourne having just signed a long-term deal. So I think we need to back off on that and realise that it's very unlikely we're going to get the Grand Prix back. As much as, it would be amazing and fantastic, and we'd all want that, I think the reality is, we need to stop and consider. I mean, this time last year we were talking about tearing up the track at Victoria Park. So to go from that to getting the 500 back is a positive step, but then the Grand Prix is another level. We couldn't do the Grand Prix as we did it in the modern era. It just wouldn't work. So, there's a lot of realities that would probably stop that.
I think anybody who's been listening to the podcast, the Adelaide Grand Prix series of the podcast through parts 1, 2 and 3, they would have seen the article and thought, after all of the things that we've been through and all of the things that we've spoken about, the likelihood of us getting the Formula One back is ultra slim. So having said that, what stars would need to align for the Formula One to come back, apart from, the government correctly guessing 7 numbers in the Powerball?
To me, it's very simple. We need permanent facilities. Otherwise, it doesn't work financially. And we have seen that in Melbourne. They have a permanent facility, the pit building, which, when the Grand Prix is on, houses all the corporates, the teams, the garages, the pits, everything. And then for the rest of the year, it turns into basketball and netball courts, which is a great mixed-use facility. We don't have that. We've tried in the Grand Prix years. We tried in the Adelaide 500 years. It never happened. So we have to basically start from scratch every year, build it, tear it down, store it. Now, that cost is significant. And if you're going to get Formula One nowadays, they're not going to be happy with the temporary structure we have for the Adelaide 500. So it begins and ends there. So unless that discussion takes place and it happens, then I just don't think it's a reality.
Yeah. I guess, you've got to be in it to win it. There was zero chance of us actually getting it back. I did read through, however, some of the comments, and some of the comments against the article were very, Melbourne stole it. We need to get our Grand Prix back from Melbourne. Melbourne this, Melbourne that. Part 3 in the last podcast, we went through the reasons why we lost it. It wasn't just Melbourne stealing it. Are articles like this counterproductive to us actually moving on from the fact of of Melbourne stealing it, or is it a case of any publicity is good publicity?
I think they hurt because it focuses on that stolen element, and I think we need to change that discussion and probably realise that we played a big part in it too, losing it. At the end of the day, we had it, and when you've got something, it's your job to keep it. So we didn't do a good enough job in doing that, so we paved the way for someone like Melbourne to come along and take it. So I think those articles can be, counterproductive, especially for what, people like me are trying to do, is sort of remember how good we had it and what a great event it was. And it was of its time. And that's not a criticism, it's just a reality of a city of Adelaide's size, that it sort of worked well in that 80s, 90s period when Formula One was sort of on that brink of explosion. Because if you look at the calendar now, it's unlikely that we're comparing ourselves to Las Vegas or Azerbaijan or Singapore. It's gone another level. When we had the Grand Prix, it was, permanent facilities in Europe, the odd trip to Canada and Japan and us. So it was just a reality of its time, and it was amazing for what it was, and we need to celebrate that rather than try to hold this idea that it was sort of taken from us and we need to get it back.
Alrighty, so that wraps up the news. On to the little pop quiz. So name the engine and configuration. Just have a think about it at home. And Adrian, I'll give you 10 seconds to think of your answer. What do you think?
I'd say Ferrari V12 from 95.
Correct answer. Well done. Fantastic. Alrighty, news is done, quiz is done. Shall we move on to the main part of the podcast?
Sure.
So part 4 in the Adelaide Grand Prix series is how we can remember and celebrate the Grand Prix. During the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, it was very interesting to hear Damon Hill and Johnny Herbert talking about the Baku City Street Circuit. And Damon Hill said that obviously Baku being a street circuit, also having that long straight and the 90-degree corners is very much like Adelaide. So, we see it time and time again. Adelaide's being brought up. And that's one of the ways that we can remember, isn't it? Keep that conversation going and keeping the memories alive.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we said in the last podcast, is that's ultimately what you're paying for when you get a major event like this, is that you become part of history of whatever that is. So we're always going to be spoken about in the context of, Senna's last win or Schumacher's first championship or all these sort of things. So we're always going to be part of that Formula One history. And we obviously had the benefit of those two championship deciders, which were sort of, key moments in Formula One history. So that's a good place to start, and obviously we need to celebrate the fact that it really was a golden era of Formula One. We had some pretty amazing names like Senna, Prost, Mansell, Piquet, all those guys, and so it's good in that sense that even though we only had it for 11 years, we had probably 11 of some of the best years of Formula One. So that's a great place to start, is that I'd say we had a golden era. So we should celebrate. I think the longer we had the Grand Prix, the more we probably, the longer you've got something, the probably less you appreciate it. So in that sense, it's unique because it was such a sort of short time frame, but there was such significant memories within that.
If people head to Adelaide and want to check out what is here at the moment of the Adelaide Street Circuit, obviously there's the track running through Victoria Park. Around October of last year, so 2021, they were talking about digging that track up after the previous government cancelled the Adelaide 500. Absolutely ridiculous decision and suggestion to make about digging it up, and thank God that it didn't go ahead. How many people do you get? Your Facebook page has, 15,000 likes on it?
Yeah, I think we're 17 now.
Okay, yeah, nice. Do you get many people inboxing you saying, hey, I'm coming to Adelaide, what is there to check out? Do you have a museum or...?
Yeah, absolutely. That was, especially pre-COVID, that was one of the most common direct messages I'd get. And it was always, to the point where I had a pre-prepared message. And it was always disappointing to just say, look, literally, there isn't much, apart from the track itself. There's the Senna handprints, there's the other handprints down Hutt Street. There's not plaque or a memorial or a statue or anything at the Grand Prix. You know, if you go to Victoria Park and you read the signs, they're all about the horse racing or the cycling or, you know, what Victoria Park, you know, the foundations of Adelaide. And it's just this sort of, there's no mention of the Grand Prix. And I just always thought that was just so puzzling, considering that's the thing that attracted most people to Victoria Park through the whole history. So we need something. And, you know, that's where the motivation for the Facebook page and the book came from, is just that there's nothing, nowhere I can guide people to say, you know, this is what it was. And, you know, I work in the motorsport industry and, you know, I can see the impact Adelaide had. But then I came back to Adelaide and it's like we didn't really appreciate it or sort of promote it. So we needed to do something. So, you know, the fact that the track is staying is obviously the key point, because if we dug that up, that's it. You know, that's the last remaining history. So we need to build on that and just get, you know, it's about those little simple things just to acknowledge it.
Well, saying that we need a more permanent reminder is a nice segue into our special guest today. So Michael's been sitting here patiently waiting. Just a little bit for those of you listening at home. So I've known Michael for quite some time now, and when he caught wind of the podcast, he said, Matt, I have exactly what you need. So Michael's very thankfully, thank you to yourself, Michael, for loaning all of the equipment that we're using today. Just to give people a rundown, because you may have heard a little bit of a difference in the production quality of the podcast through this Adelaide Grand Prix series. When we caught up at Victoria Park, we had the mixing desk, we had the microphone stands, headphones, we jagged some power, so ran a 25-metre power cord into the Victoria Park grandstand. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do with the podcast, is have it here in Adelaide and also be somewhere on location, and just trying to snag power somewhere was just an absolute nightmare. 2 and 3 was recorded, being the city, we've got a fantastic plane flying overhead. 2 and 3 was recorded with the wireless microphone direct to the phone. And then now we've got the mixing board back. I've gone out and purchased a portable power pack with a built-in inverter. And then through the mixer, we can obviously put in that pre-recorded interviews. We can put in sound effects, so it just gives a little bit of a different level to the podcast. So with that over and done with, Michael, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks for the invitation, and good to be here with Adrian as well.
So you've got a very exciting project on the burner. Just tell us what that one is.
Yeah, it's on the burner. It's been on the burner for a little while. I've had a couple of motorbike accidents put me off track on it, but I've met with the Senna Foundation many years ago in 2016 and got an approval, all in writing officially, to proceed with a memorial at the Senna chicane. I've always felt that although the handprints are nice, they're a little bit hard to see. No one knows they're there, and I think Adrian will commit that most people could go to the parklands and ring him up and say I didn't see anything. That started out just as a statue, but we also want to integrate into it a sort of acknowledgement to all the volunteers and all the people that have put the Grand Prix on, who bought it to town. So it's a nod to them as well. But as Adrian said earlier, the Adelaide's known as the last win for Ayrton Senna. He's probably the biggest name that was here through the 11 years. If you asked anybody, what they remember about the Adelaide Grand Prix, it was either the black and gold Lotus flying around, or the Marlboro McLaren screaming past faster than anyone else could. And it was a great time. Good memories for a lot of people in Adelaide, and something that has come through in the what you've been listening to for the last 15 minutes, that we really need to celebrate and remember and embrace, and hold out, be able to hold our head up high that we, in that era, we held the best Grand Prix of anybody around the world. We set the standard for most of the events nowadays, with concerts and 4-day events and support races and all of that. We really set a standard that Formula One hadn't seen when the Grand Prix came here, and we really need to celebrate that, as well as I've been to Imola, to the memorial for Ayrton Senna there, and the amount of people that visit. You go there, I was there, it was pouring rain the day I was there, and there were just people coming. There's T-shirts, flags, posters, people's sentimental little bits they tie to the fence, and it just brings people, and like we were saying a minute ago, there's not much here to remember the Grand Prix, and there's not much. That significance of Ayrton Senna's last win, is something that no one else in the world has. We are the place.
One of the things that I found with the Senna Memorial in Imola is it's not life size, is it? And you can't gauge that from the pictures, but it's like a miniature. It might even be half size of him. The one that you have planned for Victoria Park,
yes,
is that full size?
Yes, that'll be full size. If you've seen the Senna movie, on the bottom right corner of that, there's an image of, I think it was actually a race in Suzuka where Ayrton crashed in practice or something, and he took his helmet off, put it on one of the concrete barriers, and just sat there with his head on his chin watching the other cars, and as he used to do in the day, analyse his competition. He was pretty big on that. So he was sitting there sort of just contemplating what was going on, I gather, and it's a great image. And we've sort of taken that concept and we're doing a life-size bronze, which will be at ground level with a sort of section of the what would be the concrete barrier, and it'll have pavers and all that around it, so people can walk up, stand either side, get their photo taken with Ayrton Senna. It's a great little thing we've done. We've got the maquette of it, which is was prepared, ready to go back to Brazil to be presented to the family for approval. Something we'll be doing in the near future. We've just got to get the project back on track. As I said, had a couple other projects on the go, and Matt's actually sort of pushed me a bit to head back this way and get it done. I think it's time, with a little bit of help from, rather than it's been a project I was doing by myself, and I've got most of the way, but I just need to get a little bit of help, and let's do something that really makes it stand out. It'll be the centrepiece of what represents the era we had with the Grand Prix.
So you've got that little miniature version made, and for the sculpture itself, you went to one of the very best, didn't you, Ken Martin?
Yeah, we approached Ken, who I met with him. I went over to Port Lincoln and met in his shed, where he makes some great work, does some great. You've all seen the Mackay Diva, the Jason Gillespie. I think Barry Robran was one of his. The tuna fisherman on the foreshore at Port Lincoln. Recently, Karen McAvoy in Streaky Bay. He just released that one, and Karen was over to launch that with him, and that's But when Ken didn't know who Ayrton Senna was. I gave him some photos. I rang him one day because the Senna movie was on Channel 7 on a Saturday afternoon, so I told him to sit down and watch it. But he really took to the project. He understood that, when I go and meet with him, he understood that Ayrton Senna was a very emotive, person, and he got, and as you've seen the maquette that we've made. It's captured his essence fairly well, excellently, I'd say. So yeah, and Ken's enjoyed doing that, and he's keen to do the real one. So
we'll stick a picture of the little miniature version up on the Facebook page, because it really is impressive to see. Ken's work is just out of this world. Talented artist. Putting a statue into Victoria Park, would that be good for tourism as well, Adrian?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly what Adelaide needs if we're going to celebrate the Grand Prix. We start to, we need something, and that's a fantastic thing to have. Senna is, as we said, he's the driver we most associate with the Adelaide Grand Prix era. So it's, fitting that we celebrate that, especially, his last win was here. And it's sort of those things we need to get back. Saving the Adelaide track was one thing. Now we need, the plaques, the memorials, and something, because I don't think, as we said, we're unlikely to get it back. So we might as well celebrate what we had, rather than trying to hold on to something that we're unlikely to get. So, that's what we need. We need something, and that's exactly what, tourists would want to see. The reality is, if you're from Europe, you've probably only heard of Adelaide in the context of having a Grand Prix. So if you're going to come to Adelaide, you'd want to see something to do with the Grand Prix, and that's exactly what they'd want to see. Yeah.
Adelaide is a very art-filled city. We've got the bronze pigs in Rundle Mall. We've also got the, 100-foot high, chrome pigeon. I actually don't think that having a Senna statue at Victoria Park is outside the realms of possibility. I think it's something that we could actually really make happen.
Absolutely. I think, that's a start, definitely. And we need, it goes back to our previous discussion about the permanent facility. That's unlikely. but these little things would be great additions, and they wouldn't take much. It's not like it's going to have, a massive, big impact. So we need something there. So this is a great start, and hopefully it happens because, especially now that we have a government that's supporting motorsport, we need to see something to do with the Grand Prix. Obviously, we've got the Adelaide Motorsport Festival, which is the living embodiment of the Grand Prix era, but we need something more permanent.
Yeah, when I originally, when I started the project, I spoke with the, I can't remember the manager's name there, but there was a message that it would be a good addition to the marketing of the centre stands, the centre chicane, but also more importantly that most of the people that are working at the Adelaide 500 didn't know we had a Grand Prix. They were only born, they're millennials or they're young, and they didn't know we had a Grand Prix, and it was a good way even of bringing that into the motorsport history of the people that were actually running the event now. So there's a big connection and value in having the statue there for a number of reasons.
Fantastic, Michael. We'll keep in touch as far as the statue goes. Check out the progress on that. Obviously, these things aren't an overnight project, so it's not like the statue's going to be going in next week. But I have no doubt that at some point there will be a statue at the centre chicane. Michael, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much for the invitation.
And also thanks again for the use of the podcast stuff.
It does sound good.
So I knew that some of the street names around Adelaide were named after previous Formula One drivers. I didn't realise it was in Wingfield. After looking up on Google Maps, I think there's definitely a Senna Road, isn't there?
Yes, Senna, Rosberg, Johansson, a lot of them, the drivers from 85. Wingfield was expanding at the time. It was an industrial, still is from memory, like an industrial suburb, and sort of I think they took the opportunity to celebrate the Grand Prix and have the names there. And I think the main road you turn in on is Rosberg Road from memory, and then there's Senna and Berger and the like. And it is strange that it's out there and not in the city. Obviously, unlikely that it would be, but just little things like that, a nice little touch. I remember the last time I was there, I was always sort of surprised that some of the street names, the street plates are still there, considering like a Senna street name would be valuable for someone's man cave, I'm sure, but obviously we can't condone that sort of behaviour. But great little touch.
Having the Senna Memorial at the Centre Chicane in Victoria Park will be the absolute gold standard as far as having a physical permanent reminder in the ground. There's a sign in Victoria Park as well, just outlining about the cycling that happens there. Even a sign, even if it's near the Victoria Park grandstand, just a sign maybe with a track map and a little bit more of an extension about what the Adelaide Grand Prix, how many years it was here for, maybe a list of the winners, some of those notable points in the different years. The sign would be something easy as well in the meantime to get put up.
Absolutely. To me, that's the bare minimum that should be there. And maybe it's because not enough years has passed. Maybe it's still that lingering disappointment because we lost it and the feelings around that. I suspect it's that. I don't understand why it hasn't happened. I think it needed the initiative of someone to push it, and we haven't had that from councils and governments. We've had councils and governments who have really wanted to forget that we had the Grand Prix. And so the result is you have younger generations, as we were saying, who don't realise we had it. They'll watch Netflix and watch Formula One now and not realise that, we had that in the 80s and 90s, so we need to celebrate that. We need some acknowledgement of it, just so when people walk past, they can understand that, what happened, that, here in 95 was, hundreds of thousands of people to watch a Grand Prix. Because it's, even when I go to Victoria Park now, I still, have that moment where I go, it's hard to believe that it was all here. Because, obviously there's nothing there, no permanent structure. So it would be good to have that. And, that's the minimum that we need, and then that's when we can build on things like statues and things. Because and then when we have the Adelaide Motorsport Festival there, it's great to have that event there, but also with that sort of acknowledgement of there's the statue, there's the sort of plaque, and away we go.
One of the things you can do if you head into Adelaide, you can actually walk the Adelaide street circuit, can't you? So one of the ideas that I had is on the corner of each of the road is, it doesn't need to be a full street sign, but And you already see them throughout Rymel Park as well, just the wooden post with the little pointer on top. Just have those on each corner, and then just directing people down, well, this is Jones Street, that's Brabham Street, there's the hairpin, and maybe a 1.2 kilometre, maybe like a meterage sort of thing, just to guide people so you can also have that permanent walking track. And, it wouldn't just be people who like the Formula One just doing it. You could even say, okay, well, I want to do I think it's a shade over 3 kilometre walk. Let's walk the Adelaide Street Circuit and check out Adelaide. Another easy thing to do.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And especially, as you said, because you can, it's all there. So it'd be a great walk to do. It'd be great to have that sort of understanding of where things happened. This is the corner where Schumacher and Hill collided in '94, for example. And then it brings it to life. I think the problem we have in Adelaide is we know we had it. It's a memory, but because the physical embodiment of it doesn't really exist anymore, aside from, the track at Victoria Park, it's almost hard to comprehend. If we had those things, it would sort of bring it to life a bit more. And again, we're not talking about a significant outlay or anything like that. It's just little things that would make such a huge difference.
We do, obviously now have a motorsport-focused government in. I think that's pretty fair to say that they're motorsport-focused. So, yeah, hopefully, with them there, if some of these ideas were put forward, hopefully the council and the government might be a little bit more lenient to some of these things happening.
Yeah, ultimately that's what stopped it. I know personally when I started my project, I would go to publishers and things looking for support, and they didn't want a bar of it because the Adelaide Grand Prix had this negative element. The thing I was told was, why would we want to put money into something that was lost? It has that sort of, negative feeling. And I think we need to change that, and I think that's where this government needs to probably, get behind that. And I think the Motorsport Festival is the big thing that we've said. Like, it's, it is that sort of living museum, if you like. But if there was something more permanent, just the little things like we said, that would make a big difference. And I think, it'd be great one day if we could look and say, I could direct people to say there is a museum for the Grand Prix at Victoria Park. You can see some old cars, you can see the posters, you can, whatever it is, that would be the ultimate end goal, I think. And I think it was an event, the size and stature and the impact it had, I think it deserves that.
Do you think there would be the foot traffic, though, for something like a museum?
Not sure, but, if there was something, I'm sure it would build. I think, if we look back at the history of the Grand Prix, it was significant enough for the crowd that it got and the impact that it had. So I guess it depends on where Formula One goes and that sort of thing. But I think it deserves something, and I think we're coming at it from a point where there's nothing at the moment. So that sort of pie in the sky stuff. As we said a year ago, we were talking about tearing up the track. So we've got a long way to go, and let's get the 500 back, let's get the Motorsport Festival back, let's get the statues in and go from there.
Yeah. 2025 will be 30 years since the final Grand Prix, or 40 years since the first, whatever way you look at it. And hopefully we'll have Adelaide Motorsport Festival 2025, perfect time to celebrate the anniversary. Exhibition there?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget the State Library has a lot of the trophies and things. There's the posters and photos, and there's so much material there. There's even a few Formula One cars of that era still in Adelaide. So there's enough there to make something happen and celebrate it. And a lot of the drivers are still around. Some still work in Formula One. So I think there's something there, and we're always going to have anniversaries with the Grand Prix. We had it sort of for a long enough period that there's always going to be something to celebrate. We just had Goodwood over the weekend, the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and they celebrated Nigel Mansell's championship win in '92. So that's an anniversary of Mansell and Senna colliding in Adelaide in '92. So there's always something to celebrate, and we have all that material. We just need to do it, and if it was the three of us, I think we'd be able to make it happen. It requires governments and councils and things. Victoria Park's always going to be a sort of hot topic as to its use, so we just need those governments and councils to come on board and go from there and get behind it.
So, like I said, no doubt, I know that one day there will be a centre statue in Victoria Park at the centre chicane. We went through some of the other ways that we can remember the Adelaide Grand Prix, such as a sign with a little bit more meat regarding the Adelaide Grand Prix at Victoria Park. Signs on the corners of the track to also turn it into a walking track. Possible museum exhibition at the 2025 Adelaide Motorsport Festival. So I think, that's got a few starting points there for us to work on. If you've got any ideas on how we can remember the Adelaide Grand Prix or things that you would like to see, feel free to drop us a message on the Facebook page or the YouTube channel. Adrian, thanks again. It's once again been fantastic to have you join me. Great as always. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
So don't forget to check out the Facebook page, give it a like, also the YouTube channel, subscribe to keep up to date with all of the latest from Relive Adelaide. Thank you for joining me, keep smiling, and bye for now.